This is Internet Marketing.
Hello and welcome to the Internet Marketing Podcast brought to you by SiteVisibility. I'm your host, Scott.colenutt, and with me today is Julius Solaris, VP of Marketing Strategy on the Events Division at Hopin. Welcome to the podcast, Julius.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Such a pleasure. And hi to all your listeners.
Excellent. So today we're going to be discussing how to generate demand using shared experiences. We'll weave in a little bit about Hopin and the features and functionality within Hopin. And then we'll talk a little bit more and draw from your experience of the events industry. And to kick things off, do you want to describe a little bit more about what you do at Hopin, what Hopin is all about, and maybe your day-to-day role in the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Scott, actually, our founder, Johnny Bufferat, I believe was in London at the time. Hopin is a British company by founding, even though it's fully remote. We're everywhere. And the story is quite interesting, I guess, for your listeners too, as Johnny was confined in bed for an autoimmune disease for quite some time before the pandemic. And therefore, he was missing out on everything that London has to offer in terms of amazing events and tech community meetups and the likes. So he decided to build a platform that could sort of extend the one-directional functionality of webinars, specifically online, and create more of an experience that would resemble that of attending events in person. And obviously, this was 2019 when the first iteration of the product shipped, and the pandemic hit. And Hopin becomes, from a few people, almost in the space of a couple of years, almost 1,000 people, and then $1 billion in funding, and the fastest growing European company of all times. And therefore, yeah, quite a story, right?
Talk about your involvement in that. So when did you join the company and start experiencing this roller coaster ride with Hopin?
I actually was quite late to the game in Hopin's terms, but 5 months ago now. But I got to meet Johnny in my previous capacity as an editor of one of the most sort of popular websites for event planners online called EventMB. I've been editor of that and founder of that for 15 years. And I got to meet Johnny in that capacity. So I was like involved, I guess, as a commentator at the beginning, looking at this trajectory. And then so, I guess, amazed by it that I decided to join and made the switch from media to technology and embraced. I've always loved technology and event technology specifically. That was my topic, right? That's what I love to talk about. And I guess I made the jump and joined event tech.
And what was it that amazed you? That's a really interesting word to use. You talked there about jumping from the media side to the technology side and being amazed by what they had on offer. So talk me through, what was it about Hopin that you thought, wow, this is different or unique and it's going to add something to the events industry?
That's a great question, actually, and one that I love to answer because I've been blogging. Essentially, I founded a blog right in 2007 when blogs were cool. And my topic was event technology, and I was amazed by the intersection of technology and live experiences and the impact that trends like social media at the time, like new things in 2008, 2009 that were happening to the event industry could have an impact on the way we meet and we gather. And therefore, I was always like following all the tech news. I worked in many capacities as an editor with all the marketing teams from all the companies in event technology, from Eventbrite to Cvent, household names to a certain extent. And I remember I always point at kind of 2015 when a company called Double Dutch raised a founding round of 30 million, I believe it was. And we were shocked, right? Mm-hmm. That was an absurd amount of money for the event industry, a crazy amount of money. Usually you would see rounds of like 1 million, 2 million. So 30 millions were just mind blowing. So when Hopin comes, and all of a sudden, in the space of a year and a half, they raised $1 billion. It's for someone that has been doing this for 15 years, it's very easy to see that this is like once in a lifetime type of opportunities. It's just something that doesn't happen in our industry. It's just the sort of the beginning of something different, of a revolution. And obviously, Hopin has been at the forefront, of many companies in event technology that did crazy rounds in the past year and a half, 2 years. But the vision that Johnny has, the kind of the way the tool connects people is just unique, and I wanted to be part of it.
And what is it about the tool that you think facilitates connection or experience in a way that's different to other event technology software? And I say this with the context of, I remember particularly early on in the pandemic, the very first thing is everyone starts working remotely. People are looking at things like Zoom. And it actually, within maybe 6 months, there are all these funny memes and kind of joke articles coming out saying Skype should have been in the same position that Zoom's in, and Skype missed the boat, and they really should have been providing the solutions that we were all looking for. And so I imagine that I know because I was looking for these conferencing solutions, these communication solutions myself for our company. So I know how much of a competitive space it's been in 2020, 2021, and still today. Was there anything that you can point to within the culture or technology at Hopin that gave you all an advantage and that set you up to capitalize on the demand for event technology software?
Yeah, once again, great question here. I've been thinking about that, Scott, for quite a while. There's few factors. One is culture, as you mentioned. I think there's an obsession with product that showed up at the very beginning in terms of many planners, many marketing teams, many people that were all of a sudden in need of a virtual tool that never had an experience before with it. They had to go through a crash course into understanding what they needed and to find the tool flexible, easy enough, but then that they would deliver a good experience to the audience that they could use. And, it's very tough to define like what delivers a good experience, right? It's still tough to find for people that for companies that try to imitate, for example, an iPhone experience, right? As opposed to a Palm OS experience back in 2007, right? Mm-hmm. You see it and it's immediately different, right? So I believe there's a lot of product culture that went into the product in early days that set it apart in the multitude of tools available. And then the second part is like some features that were available within the tool made it very viral immediately. And one that I like to pinpoint at, it's what I refer to as the networking shuffle module. That's a module within the platform that allows you to connect to random attendees for 3 minutes. You can decide to extend it if you like your conversation or just to move on to the next one. And literally, like I was attending this event a few weeks ago, and I found myself like spending an hour and a half on that module, just meeting random people and enjoying like these serendipity, right? Which at the end of the day is what we miss about live events. If you can think about it, we don't miss the content of live events. We don't miss the keynote. We don't miss the breakout session. I mean, yeah, the content is great. Consuming it live has a special sort of meaning to it. But what we miss is that occasional encounter that we do at a coffee break or at a party, and that connection. And I believe Hopin was very clever in replicating that experience early on.
And this is interesting because it leads me to one of my questions, which is about hybrid events. Because I think most people listening to the podcast, me included, like we're familiar with offline events and we're familiar with conferences and webinars. But hybrid events, for some people, are pretty new. I've not hosted a hybrid event, but I've attended hybrid events. Are you able to describe, maybe for the people that aren't familiar, what hybrid events look like in general, but also as hosted on Hopin? What's different about the functionality in comparison to maybe offline events?
So hybrid events obviously very important right now as we've sort of entered this new world of virtual events, both virtual events and hybrid events. A little bit of history here for your audience as well. They're not new. They didn't start with the pandemic. They are tools that have been used for years in the industry. But they haven't had sort of the trajectory in the past 20 years that they've had in the past 20 months. Because even if you think in terms of the features available within these tools, right now, we've just seen an incredible amount of progress in the past 20 months. So let's reset the conversation to say that hybrid tools, virtual tools available today are nowhere comparable to whatever was before the pandemic, right? So that sets a new kind of need in the market to connect in a different way, right? Because we all saw the value of connecting virtually while we couldn't attend, right? And all of a sudden, that becomes kind of a continued need as we're seeing it in the office to a certain extent, where a lot of people are deciding to stay home, right? And companies are starting to offer hybrid workplaces. The same kind of applies for events. So if we define a hybrid event, really, we're thinking the traditional definition is an event that is happening offline, so in person, but as a virtual component as well, right? So, and the two components are happening at the same time. So there's an online audience and there's an in-person audience, right? This definition we're finding in the next year or so is very fluid. So keep that in mind. It's evolving. We're just in year 3 of the event tech revolution, as I like to call it, because things are moving super fast. So this definition is evolving. And so a lot of people are, for example, now referring to synchronous hybrid experiences, what I just defined. So one audience online, one audience offline, connecting at the same time. And then asynchronous experiences, hybrid experiences, meaning an event that's happening online and then followed up by an in-person event, right? Or an in-person event that has a virtual component happening a week after. So we're seeing a lot of evolution of this model, right? That means that the creative spirits of event planners, marketing teams are really embracing what we like to call more of a hybrid event strategy, a mix of tools available according to different objectives, different audiences, different type of events. Sometimes virtual, sometimes in person, sometimes both at the same time, sometimes both spaced out a little bit. So I hope that creates a little bit of context to what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the way I'm kind of visualizing it is almost like a workflow. It takes events from being static to maybe being more sequential. And so we can now start to host or view events as a series of events or sub-events as opposed to one single event that's hosted online and that just one experience alone. Is that kind of a fair summary?
You are absolutely correct. That's exactly what we're seeing as we're, the big word, I believe, in 2022 for marketing teams is community, right? And I believe that, what we like to refer to as event-driven communities, this is like the next frontier for events, like a sense of community that is built through virtual touch points through the year that culminate into an in-person experience. And in that in-person experience, some audience maybe could not travel still, or could not attend, or don't want to be bothered with the travel. And therefore, they would prefer to attend online. And that's where kind of the hybrid push, it's needed. Today, maybe it's needed because of a pandemic that it's happening. Tomorrow, it may be needed because sustainability pressure is happening. So traveling like to the other side of the world for a day, maybe it's an overkill. Maybe I would say surely will be an overkill in a few years, or maybe just because of inclusion. I like to think of the period between March 2020 and June 2020 where all these virtual events were happening online for free as the biggest advertisement that the event industry has ever had for itself. Because a lot of people all of a sudden were able to attend many events that they couldn't be. So to take all of that away from people that cannot be there because of their disability, because of their inability to attend for whatever reason, because of the fact they have children at home, for whatever reason, that inclusion piece is so relevant.
Yeah, we'll maybe move on to that in a moment as we discuss this concept of shared experiences, because I think it ties in with that and the ability to meet and interact with people that perhaps you wouldn't meet or interact with if you were in an in-person event or in your normal workspace. So I want to hold that thought for just a second, because just bringing all of this together and bringing it to life for anyone listening, I really understand you've explained clearly the benefits and how hybrid events can work, but I'm interested in your favorite examples over this last couple of years. So have there been any, those could be events that have been hosted on Hopin, or they could be other platforms that you've attended an event as an attendee, but do you have any standout examples where you think, wow, this in particular, this hybrid event was delivered really, really well and it enhanced the experience?
Well, I feel that one of the examples we like to refer to quite a lot internally and externally is it's actually once again UK-based event called Mind the Product, which is part of a community for product managers, and they had quite an interesting strategy, which I feel it's one that responds to one of the needs that event planners and marketers alike have right now, the uncertainty, right? We all face uncertainty. We face uncertainty in terms of like, can we attend? Will we be able to travel? Will be safe enough to gather? Will there be regulation? So there's a climate of uncertainty that will keep on going for the remainder of the year. And therefore they approach this with a completely change, a complete shift in the narrative to a certain extent. What they did is they had an in-person event scheduled, but what they did is they scheduled before that a virtual event that would just level up all the attendees with a day of virtual content online, and that minimized the risks. So, say for example, they had to cancel last minute because of change or new spike in the pandemic and the likes. They still had that virtual experience. They front-loaded the virtual experience first, so that whatever happened afterwards, there was still a good reason for everybody to meet. But that virtual experience, then the in-person event actually did happen. What the purpose of and the beauty of that virtual experience was that it created the community and the connection before the event, so that people that attended that in person, they already connected on the platform and they were already you have this feeling, right? That all of us know from social media, from Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, whatever you use, of connection that we experience online that again almost like gets relieved when we meet offline.
It's
so
like it's like an icebreaker almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But even more than that, I believe that it's creating almost like a deeper level of connection in virtual. That's what we're discovering a lot. The connection that gets created over virtual, it's a pretty meaningful one. I can give you an example of that. So one community I look at with a lot of interest is the gamers community, right? These are people that play online, meet online all the time over platforms like Twitch. They discuss, they connect. Yet, if you think about the venues that they're building here in Las Vegas, where I live, they're stadia. They're actual stadia for gamers, right? Humongous venues, stadium-sized venues for gamers to come together and do esports in presence. So can you think about almost like how counterintuitive is that? The biggest online communities almost like need to meet in person as much as possible, right? So you have this tension that builds up through online connection, and the only way to relieve that tension is almost like it's actually to meet in person. So they have Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting correlation between the two and depth of connection online.
That's really interesting. One thing I talk about and go back to is you mentioned about inclusion being an important benefit to hybrid events. And I'm an introvert. I don't particularly like networking. I don't think I'm good at it, despite being a podcast host and talking to people. And what's really interesting is that I can see the benefits of having a virtual event before attending an in-person event. I think that would maybe relieve some of that event related anxiety that I get, because sometimes I get that little bit of anxiety around networking and not knowing what to talk about. But having a virtual event ahead of an in-person event might give you that icebreaker, that confidence, just those talking points that make that in-person event that little bit more comfortable, particularly for introverts, I think.
Scott, you're so right with that. I'm an introvert myself, despite I've been, speaking on stages around the world. Even speaking, I feel is like it's easier for introverts that actually walk up to someone and introduce yourself and say, "Hi, I'm Julius. I love to." Like, what do you do? How do you? I hate small talk.
Yeah.
I'm always on the side of a room. I don't want to meet anybody. I don't feel the need to go and introduce myself to anybody. So I can relate to that so much. And I believe this virtual experience has been liberating for a lot of us, right? So all of a sudden we can have our online personas and just like meet. And I want to go back also to the networking shuffle module within Hopin, because as an introvert, that gives me the confidence to be in my house with my camera on, with, in my setting, but then still connect to someone else, right? Without the awkward in-person experience of, going outside of my comfort zone. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I appreciate in-person events to the stage that they push me in that sense a little bit, right? A little bit out of my comfort zone. I appreciate those events that make it easier for introverts to connect. But virtual events are extremely inclusive for introverts, and they really create an option to attend. And then there's also a concept of almost feeding different personality types, right? So the introverts will attend more online and show up maybe for the big event that they care about. The extroverts that don't care about online, they're just going to go and attend all the in-person events. So we're catering for different type of personalities. We're creating more custom experiences for them and respecting their personas. Not everybody likes to party and, being drunk all the time. Alcohol is a big topic as well, right, within the industry. So not everybody likes to do that. So I think we're entering a different phase. And hybrid, virtual, they're enabling for a lot of people in terms of finally be themselves.
And are all of these points that we're discussing here, particularly about kind of, I've forgotten the name of the actual module, but the breakout networking rooms, are those what you would describe as creating shared experiences? And maybe could you just elaborate in a little bit more on what this shared experience concept means to you?
The shared experience concept is really out of the early days of the pandemic. We feel as a team, and we've been talking about this internally quite a lot, that whatever happened in the early months of the pandemic, this sense of connectedness, because all of a sudden we realize we have so many tools to connect, right? And thank God for this ability to get together and do birthdays online and do whatever occasion presents to us personally and in business endeavors online, with all these tools available that connect us more than ever. Yet there's a feeling, there's a sense of being almost alone in our houses at the same time, right? There's almost like this clash between the readily available tools and how these tools make us feel. And we started a new sort of redefinition of our brand, and our motto is "Feel Closer," because we feel that we want to, in this era of connectedness, the purpose of tools like Hopin is to connect to the people better, makes us feel closer, give us an experience that resemble the one that is in person. Actually embracing the in-person experience as well, because we started as a virtual tool, but then moved on to buy and acquire 3 companies that do in-person event technology specifically. So, and really help to connect human beings better, because, we believe there's a lot of work to do. We're just year 3 of this revolution. And really, we're working so hard to think, how can we make the experience better? How can we make it more human? How can we make it more accessible? How can it be more immersive? All these elements sort of play a role. It's something so difficult to define, right? That's why the best teams, I guess, we're very lucky to have probably one of the best team in the industry right now in terms of people that come from the biggest technology and non-technology companies here and around the world, to come together and think, how can we make the experience better? Because at the end of the day, we want to feel closer, and we don't want to be apart. That's the power that events have, right? To connect people. And we try to be there wherever, whenever, however people want to connect. We want to be there, facilitating that connection.
I appreciate this is a question that you're probably enthusiastic about and might make your mind explode. But I'm really interested to know the technology, whether that's hardware or software, that you think really helps to facilitate that kind of connection, that shared experience, particularly for in-person events and hybrid events. Is there anything that stands out to you?
I believe that right now, when we attend in-person events, we have very specific needs, okay? And there are different needs from before the pandemic. So before the pandemic, we would show up for an in-person event to listen to a keynote speaker or listen to some content. Mostly for that, we would purchase a ticket in most cases, especially for conferences, content-heavy programs, and the likes. That was changing, but the transition has accelerated in a sense that I don't know if you attended any event during the pandemic in presence. The needs for me are completely different. The experience that I want to have is completely different. I was stuck in a room for like an hour and a half listening to a keynote during an in-person event, and I was thinking, like, why are they doing this to me? I don't need to be here. Literally, let me go. I've been listening to people for the past 12 months, and this is the first event I go back to in person, and you're literally like locking me up in a room while I want to meet people, hug people, be entertained, have a coffee, talk, like create those type of connections. So any type of technology that allows that connection is great. But let me tell you something. I went back to an event here in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago. So peak of Omicron, right? In America and around the world. So very tough to show up in person, right? All of those that made it, they really, really wanted to be there because there was a lot of pushback, as you've seen from CES and the likes here in Las Vegas. So I couldn't care less at that moment in time about the program, even though there were like some amazing keynotes and speeches. This is an event that is very well known in the industry for the great content that they do. Very inspirational. But I wanted to network. I wanted to see people. I was there representing Hopin, so I was on the show floor as an exhibitor as well. I wanted to connect. I wanted to do business. I wanted to be inspired by having conversations. So the interesting part, when the technology kicked in, was when I went back home. I was able, as an attendee, to go back and rewatch all the sessions that were offered to the virtual audience, right? And replay all of them, which was incredibly valuable because still there was, it was people like Scott Galloway talking. I don't know if you know him, someone that I follow online and I respect. He was talking about predictions of 2022, the metaverse, all these things that I'm passionate about. And so I missed it because I was like so concerned with it not working, but I went back home and all of a sudden was able to catch up with all that content, right? It's almost like going to you miss it at the movie theater, but who cares? You have Netflix or HBO Max or whatever, and you catch up on demand. That's something. That was incredible value to me. because I didn't want to miss out. So, but then I could rewatch everything being concentrated in my room, and I actually did catch up on it, because there's a lot of people that say I never watch replays of events. I register for them, and then I never go back and watch them. Well, I must stress, review the events you sign up for, because some events are actually worth rewatching in terms of the content that they produce. I wanna go back and but then it becomes like an event design problem rather than a technology problem. But the availability of replays, I think it's a complete game changer for the event industry, where you would miss constantly these opportunities. But now, since there's a hybrid need, there's a virtual audience, all these sessions are streamed. And by the way, one of my favorite tools ever was one of the acquisitions that we did as part of Hopin. We acquired StreamYard, which completely changed my life as an event planner when I was editor at EventMB. And we had to ship these events. We did 6 events for 60,000 event planners in the space of 9 months. And StreamYard was amazing. It would replace 6 or 7 people, honestly. So this ability to stream live and have different views and share slides on the go and feed into a virtual event platform like Hopin immediately is just game changer. And you have all these tools available for free, because Hopin, it starts for free. StreamYard, you can try it for free. All these tools available, you can create, if you're strategic about it, this is a complete change in the business model.
I've got 2 other questions about specifically kind of the use of technology for hybrid and online events, but just events in general. The first, which just came to mind, I didn't even think about this in the lead up to the podcast, and it just kind of clicked in my brain, is NFTs. And I'm interested to know if you've seen any interesting use cases for the integration of NFTs with events.
So I feel there's potential there, Scott, in terms of a group of people coming together to create something, okay? And that could be memorabilia, that could be merch that gets created at an event and then shipped within the community. That could be embedded within the community. As event platforms like ours become sort of hubs for attendees to come together and stay there more time, they become community platforms to a certain extent. The ability to create something as part of it, it's incredible, right? There's a lot of potential for it. Then there's also, I feel, as we need to reconcile a little bit with the real world. And I was having this conversation with a planner that runs an agency, and they do pharma events, right, for doctors, huge events for medical associations, 50,000 attendees plus, right? So can you think about that, Scott, for a second? It's just the perfect use case for virtual events, right? Because these are doctors, they're stressed, they're every doctor on earth right now is having a tough time. You can't afford to travel. So virtual events are perfect for doctors. Yet the audience is so resistant to the technology in many cases. He was telling me, we tried, we had to literally phone up and call every doctor and say, click on that link, then go there. Some audiences are completely resistant to technology in general, and there's still a long way to go. So my concern is when talking about stuff like NFT and the metaverse, is that it's something that we sort of technology early adopters and people that are enthusiasts about these things really embrace. But the larger, big part of the world, it's kind of it's going to take a while. It's going to take a good while unless the technology becomes incredibly simple and incredibly easy to use. So that's, I feel, part of the success of Hopin. It's so easy. People just click and you're in and you just watch it. And it's just you don't have to do anything. Stuff like NFTs, metaverse, blockchain, they're still difficult concepts for a lot of people out there. So the catch up of that, we have to see. But the potential is definitely there.
And the second question on the technology front is data. I'm really interested to know, from the host's perspective, and you can speak about this from the functionality available within Hopin, but what data do you get available as a host that allows you to enhance an event experience?
It's an excellent question, because I feel this is where it's becoming real for your audience, Scott. I feel that, if your audience is looking for kind of like that breakthrough that can make their marketing different in 2022, I feel this is the untapped territory right now, because we've seen everything online in marketing. We've tested it. We know social media, we know email, we know webinars to a certain extent. We know all these things. We already know them. There's not a lot of new innovation that is coming out of those. The tools are pretty much the same. The best practices are out there. Now, data in events, it's something new, because in-person events traditionally struggled with the data piece, right? If you think about an event in person, is, as I like to define it, is an exchange of fresh air, right? It's like we meet and then it's great. But how and why and what's the data to back that up, right? It's very tough to quantify within a virtual environment, within a hybrid environment, and even in person, because there's a lot of technology that supports that in person, but it's more difficult and more expensive. In virtual specifically, it's so easy. And all of a sudden, we're really seeing the results of that. So just to give you some quick background about the event industry. The event industry, some research I did in 2019 with thousands of event planners questioned. They responded that I think it's around 34% of them either don't care about data or don't want data as part of their event technology choices. So this is an industry that is data repellent almost, like they don't like it. They don't like it. Yet, when we look at Hopin, 85% of people that use our platform, they spend their time digging through analytics to the stage where we're seeing teams transforming. They're assigning analytics people to events, virtual events specifically, to dig into the reports available. What does it mean though? Because that's something that we're working extremely tirelessly on. And I'm so excited for what's next in the releases that we're going to make this year, specific on this piece. I feel that we're trying to move past vanity metrics, because like the question is, great reports, but so what, right? What am I going to do with it? I feel that we're already seeing the change that these reports are having, the impact that they're making on events in general. So things that are sort of you take for granted when you create a conference or convention or a trade show, stuff like, okay, a keynote has to have 45 minutes, right? No, everybody in virtual is moving away from it immediately, because you see everybody's dropping out after 20, 25 minutes. So immediately you're redefining, and that works in person too, right? Nobody wants to stay, as I mentioned to you at the beginning of the episode, I don't want to stay in a room for an hour and a half listening to a keynote. That has changed me. Virtual has changed the way I consume content at events dramatically. And planners are digging into data to decide, okay, this is the content that works best. So that was almost impossible to do before. You could do it by following up with people, asking, did you like that session? Sometimes you had the most advanced events had beacons, kind of Bluetooth enabled, to give immediate feedback about a session. So difficult. The beauty of virtual, it's so you don't the attendee doesn't have to do anything. They're just behaving. And how game changing is that? Pretty dramatic, not only for events, but also for marketing. As we enter a cookie-less environment online, where more and more companies are dropping cookies, GDPR, privacy protection, and the likes, all of a sudden you have a tool where attendees, in some cases, they pay a ticket to give you as much data as possible just for access. And event platforms have this beauty. By gating the access to events, they create incredible data points at entrance, but also within the platforms, because there's a million data points, how many downloads of a particular document, how many connections, how many interactions, what sessions work best for sponsors. All of a sudden, you have tangible ROI data you can give to sponsors, right? where we've been selling awareness forever in our industry. Like, yeah, put a banner there, have a booth there, and that's it. Now you have like how many people passed by, how many people downloaded your information, how many meetings did you do? Like everything is trackable. And it's amazing. Like this is like really the beginning of something different for B2B and B2C marketing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I think about it similar to in any marketing or business discipline, in that the more data that you collect over a longer period of time, the smarter your business or marketing gets. And in this instance, you just take that concept and apply it to events. So the events, particularly if you think about the hybrid models or the virtual models that you were discussing, if you're hosting events over a long period of time, and maybe there are more of them, but they're shorter in length or they're different in terms of their topics or concepts, then your events are just going to get smarter, tighter, more engaging, the more of them that you have. So it kind of lends itself to that sequential workflow type of model that you were talking about earlier. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, that's music to my ears, Scott, to be honest. Like that's exactly where I would love the audience to gravitate towards, in a sense, because that's the future of it. That's the natural evolution of virtual events experiences as well. A lot of people at the beginning of the pandemic, the immediate thing that a lot of us did, I'm not being judgmental here by any means, right? Our experience was in-person events. So we tried to translate the in-person event experience online. That didn't work, right? Because we wanted something different. We wanted a TV experience in terms of content with amazing moderators, engaging content, breakouts, and we can talk about, how to make it more engaging for your audience. But we also want a connection. So we wanted to connect with other attendees. We wanted to use chats. We wanted to use polls. We wanted to use breakout rooms to connect with others, but in a fast-paced environment that delivered a bunch of value to us. Because time right now, the currency is time. Like we don't have time to do anything. We're constantly on. Those people that are working right now, they're overworking. Everybody's overworking to a certain extent because they're making up for people that are not working in some cases. Or, some companies are just struggling. I don't want to enter into that. But like a lot of people feel the burnout. The burnout is real. When I make an investment to attend your virtual event, even more so an in-person event, you better deliver. Otherwise, I'm not gonna give you many chances.
And you mentioned just a moment ago, and a perfect close to this episode is the future and what the future of events online look like, or virtual events look like. But I'm particularly interested in the future at Hopin. So is there anything on the roadmap that you look at and you're particularly excited about that's rolling out, in the more immediate future over the next 6 months or year?
Well, I mean,
that you're allowed to talk about as well.
Of course not. But I don't want to have a SWAT team kind of getting into my house and arresting me for saying things. No, there's nothing much I can say. But like the data piece, very important for us. The ability to deliver better events is not just a matter of. I mean, it is a matter, probably 80% a matter of how you design your events, right? How creative you are. I think that, we have the biggest opportunity as event planners to be creative now. We get a pass. Like, you don't get a pass if you plan in-person events. You know what I mean, Scott? Like, if your mini burgers, they're not good enough, people are they're gonna cry on it on Twitter and start complaining about it. Like, in virtual events, I feel we still have a pass. Like, still there's a lot of room to experiment. And therefore, we have this opportunity to create incredible new experiences, really create something new here. Said that, I feel that platforms are responsible to help event professionals and marketing professionals to create better experiences. And the amount of data has to make sense. It's not just like vanity metrics, as I say. We need something more deeper than that helps people to make the right decisions. And we're working really a lot on that piece. And that's as much as I can say, Scott.
I think that's a great way to close. If people want to learn more about you, Hopin, the items we've discussed today, and maybe even just give Hopin a try, let them know where they can find you.
For sure. Hopin.com, HOPIN.com. Free to try, up to 200 attendees for a few hours of events. So, costs you nothing. Really easy. So, Julius at Hopin.com. If you have any question, you want to be connected to any team member to know more about what we do. To Julius online everywhere. Julius Solaris on LinkedIn. Just connect with me. I'd love to have a conversation with you. And let's keep on meeting, however, whenever we want.
Well, I'm glad I met you in this way, because you said you don't particularly like small talk at events, but I managed to corner you for 45 minutes here on the podcast and get lots of useful information out of you about the events industry. It's been an insightful conversation, so I appreciate you taking the time out today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Scott.
Brilliant. Okay, this has been the Internet Marketing Podcast. Take care.